Hello, it's Martin back with my VW ID.3, specifically the Max version, which is the top of the line example with all the extras you can think of. So I thought this would be the perfect opportunity, now that I had some time with it, to explain to you the features you get and which ones are worth seeking out, instead of looking at the very complicated packaging matrix provided in the VW brochure. A big disclaimer to make: I will only focus on the pre-facelift examples, which means cars produced from 2020, when the ID.3 launched, up to about late 2023, which is when VW brought in the revised model, but the options and trim level on those are set up completely differently. So to keep it simple, we will stick to the pre-facelift. Actually, before we get to the trim levels, let's discuss battery sizes. There are three options: a 45 kWh, a 58 kWh, and a 77 kWh pack. All of those numbers are for the usable net capacity, but unless you know that you have a really specific usage scenario or you're really tight on budget, the 58 kWh middle option is the one to go for, and it's the one which VW intended to sell in most numbers, and that has indeed happened, because most of the trim levels are available in combination with that battery. Realistically, it will get you about 200 comfortable miles on a charge. As for the visual options, you could choose your paint color. As standard, you would get Moonstone Grey. Some people make fun of it because it looks like the car was just sprayed with the primer. But nevertheless, it's popular, it's nice. You just have to keep in mind some swirl marks may be visible, so we will have to keep on top of it by polishing it frequently. That was the color of my previous ID.3. More importantly, even on a modern electric car in the 21st century, alloy wheels were an optional extra for most trim levels. As standard, you would get steel 18-inch wheels with just plastic covers on top of them, and they do look a bit cheap. So if you want to spruce up your ID.3, make sure to get one with at least the 18-inch alloy wheels, or get a spare set from eBay or something along those lines. As with most electric cars, the tire and wheel choice can have an impact on range, so if you are after efficiency, the smaller wheels are the better option. On ID.3s, because all of them are fairly aerodynamic, it doesn't make too much of a difference, and they all feature quite a narrow profile tire, at least for the size of the vehicle. But yeah, maybe avoid the 20-inch version in that case. And on top of that, you can't beat physics. The bigger the alloy and the lower profile the tire is, you will get a bit more noise in the cabin and less road comfort. With all of that out of the way, let's get to the point of this video, and that's the trim levels. Starting with the Life. That's essentially the base model, but don't dismiss it because it includes a lot of standard equipment. I'm talking heated front seats and steering wheel, a built-in navigation system, which you may think is a bit pointless because you also get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but with electric cars, a reliable built-in navigation system is essential because, especially with these ID products, they can also plan charging stops for you, so it will tell you where and how long you need to charge for. The Life also gets LED headlights, tail lights, front and rear parking sensors, adaptive cruise control, on top of all the other standard safety features you would expect, like autonomous emergency braking, lane keep assistant, etc. 4 USB-C ports in the cabin in total, 2 in the front, 2 in the back, and cloth upholstery. I will get onto the seat forms and upholstery in just a second, because there are many different variations and they changed throughout the years, even for similar trim levels. But what if you want more? Well, most people are after 2 features specifically. Number 1, more sophisticated headlights. As standard, yes, they are LEDs with LED dip beam and high beam, but they feature a reflector design rather than a projector, and it makes the car look a bit basic. Similarly, many people these days are used to and expecting a reversing camera for parking assistance, even on a compact vehicle. If that's all you need on top of the base model, you would step up to the business trim. I'm afraid the business trim was a bit short-lived because it was discontinued in July 2021 for the 2022 model year. But yeah, it includes the reversing camera, the fantastic IQ lights, which do not only have a cooler design and light bar across the front of the vehicle, but they also feature matrix technology, which means they can blank out individual sections of the high beam, so you can have maximum visibility all the time without worrying about affecting other drivers. I've already made a dedicated video about them on the channel, and in fact I've covered most topics in great detail about these ID vehicles. So instead of trying to repeat everything. In this one, I will just leave a link to an ID.3 playlist in the video description and in the top right hand corner, so you can click at that if you want to learn about some aspects in more detail. Going back to the business trim, the other niceties include rear privacy glass, keyless entry, which means you can just have the key fob in your pocket or your purse, and there is a little recess on the door handle which you can touch to lock the vehicle, or you just slide your hand into the door handle and that unlocks the car for you. If you're really concerned about relay attacks and theft, rest assured you can disable the keyless access feature within the infotainment system. Nice and simple, you don't need to go to a third-party coder. And in terms of practicality, you get a ski pass-through in the boot. As standard, even the life trim has folding rear seats in a 60-40 split, but the business model and up have that ski pass-through, so you can technically have 4 people on board and carry longer items at the same time. You also get upgraded upholstery, and this has changed over the years. When the ID.3 initially launched, it had this microfiber material on the surface you sit on and on the lower part of the backrest. However, it looked a bit odd. I'm sure VW tried to be modern and a bit different, and in fact in person it looks completely fine, but in the brochure it just looked very cheap, and as a result it put many people off the vehicles. So in about 2022, VW introduced new seats, which are also present in this vehicle. They feature a slightly different material with this repeating angular stitch pattern to make it look a bit more premium. However, keep in mind that by going for the business trim, you only get the different materials. The seat form is identical. The business trim, for the short time it was on the market, was only available in combination with a 58 kWh pack. But what if you wanted the better headlights and some of those nice to have features with the smaller battery if you just were looking for a daily city car? Well, that's where the style trim came in. It basically has all the features of the business, and on top of that it also is one of the few ones which automatically gets alloy wheels as standard, and it formed the ceiling for what you could get with the 45 kWh pack. Disclaimer: to make matters even more confusing, there are in fact 2 ID.3 style trims. The one I described up until now is the version which could be combined with the smallest 45 kWh pure battery, but before that battery pack went into production, the style trim could be combined with the 58 kWh Pro and contained completely different options, namely the panoramic glass roof in addition to the IQ lights and higher end seat upholstery, but no alloy wheels as standard, no reversing camera, etc. When we move up the lineup, the next trim is the family, and that builds on top of business, because again that's available with the middle 58 kWh pack, and that's what my previous ID.3 was. And it brings 3 features which many people are after. The big one is the panoramic glass roof, which is really expansive. It stretches all the way above rear passengers' heads, and given all ID.3s have black headlining, it does bring a lot of light into the cabin. But don't worry, unlike Tesla, if you're concerned about the cabin getting hot, you still have the option of a mechanical, electronically controlled shade. Secondly, as the name suggests, the family trim was intended for family practicality. And on that topic, it brings a variable floor in the boot. In other words, a false floor where you can either drop it down and you get more vertical space in the boot, or you raise it up and then you completely eliminate the loading lip and you have a secret compartment underneath. Keep in mind, this is in addition to the small cavity you get on all ID.3s underneath the real floor, which is big enough to house a toolkit and the charging cables, for example. And thirdly, you get a smarter climate control. As standard, all ID.3s get single zone automatic HVAC system, but on these higher trim levels you would get dual zone climate with the additional smart features where you can just press a single button to warm up your feet temporarily, hands, etc. And it combines the air vent functionality with, for example, the heated seats and heated steering wheel. It will make a lot more sense if you watch my video of the infotainment system where I explore the air conditioning controls in detail. The next level is a bit of an odd one again. It's called Tech, and if you're like me and you love all the gadgets, this is the one for you. It used to be my favorite, but just like business, it was discontinued in July of 2021. As the name suggests, it brings a lot of technology. I'm talking the travel assist system, which means the car can actively lane center instead of just ping-ponging from side to side of the lane by using the lane departure warning. It can also automatically change lanes on motorways because it has the blind spot monitoring and cross-traffic radars integrated into the rear bumper. It gets the huge 2-layer augmented reality heads-up display, an upgraded sound system, which still not particularly impressive, but at least you get speakers in the second row as well, because as standard you only get speakers in the front, etc, etc. However, it comes with a sacrifice in the form of the Comfort Package Plus. You just get the normal non-plus Comfort Package, which means you lose that intelligent 2-zone climate control, and you also no longer have the variable boot floor. Which brings me onto this car in the Max trim, and that basically gets every single feature imaginable, bar a couple of caveats, which I will get onto later. Still combined with the 58 kWh battery, but I'm talking truly luxury features, such as fully electrically adjustable front seats with an extendable base for better under-thigh support that's only available on the top trim levels, 4-way electrically adjustable lumbar support, which also has a massaging function. Now, I will be honest, it's not quite a Mercedes S-Class level of massage. It doesn't have dedicated air pockets. It just deflates and inflates the lumbar support in multiple stages, but it is still a nice feature to have on a longer trip, or if you are stuck in traffic in a busy city like London, for example. The Max also brings the Sport Plus package. At least in the UK we don't have a Sport Non-Plus, but the Sport Plus includes the dynamic chassis control, which is fully customizable. That means adaptive dampers, so you can choose how firm or soft the car feels, but it's not just either or. It's basically a slider in the infotainment with many stages in between. And progressive steering, not to be confused with steering with variable ratios. It doesn't mean that at low speeds you just twist the steering a little bit and the car is suddenly very aggressive, and vice versa. At motorway speeds you have to turn a lot to make your lane changes. This just means that the steering rack has a different ratio as you put more lock on. So in the middle of the steering rack, the steering ratio is a little bit longer, so the car feels stable at high speeds where you are using minimal inputs, but the more you turn to the side, the faster the ratio gets, if that makes sense. Crucially, as you can see based on this vehicle, it does not include the sport seats, at least not in the UK. The sport seats were available, but they are an incredibly rare option. They are basically more of a bucket style seat with more pronounced side bolstering and an integrated headrest instead of these traditional ones. Pros and cons to either of them. I know a lot of people prefer the look of the sport seats. Those follow the same form as the seats in the sister car, the Cupra Born, but I did hear that some kids complain about them when they sit in the back because the seat structure is a bit bulkier, so you get less light in the back of the cabin. So yeah, if I try to write out all the features, you really would get a pretty long list. The only things which you are missing off the top of my head are heated rear seats, which some cars in the class offer, and ventilated front seats, which are very popular on the Hyundai and Kia Group cars. With VW, you need to step up to the more executive ID.3 to get those features. But other than that, you truly have everything. Which brings us on to the last trim, the Tour, which was later renamed to just the Pro S because it was the only trim available if you wanted the biggest 77 kWh battery pack. And well, basically because it's the top of the lineup, it carries most of what the Max has. That bigger battery pack is quite a bit heavier than the middle option. And to make sure that the load rating of the chassis does not get exceeded, VW had to drop a few things. Most notably is the middle fifth seat in the back. So the Tour, or the Pro S, whatever you want to call it, is strictly a 4-seater vehicle. And also to help with cutting the weight where possible, it also loses out on the glass roof. And for the sake of completeness, let me mention that in the early days in the UK, the ID.3 was launched with the first edition, and it was actually a very nice blend of features without the price getting ridiculous. It had the most important bits, which many people want, like the reversing camera, the IQ Matrix headlights, the nicer microfiber upholstery, ambient lighting with 30 colors to choose from, keyless entry, rear privacy glass. So basically overall very similar to the business trim, but it didn't follow the packaging structure like the later trim levels did. And if you wanted something a bit more funky and distinct, you could get them with an orange dashboard in combination with a white steering wheel and white trims in the door cards. Having said that, personally, I would stay away from them unless you really know what you're doing. They used to be a little bit buggy, and while there have been many software updates in the meantime to bring them in line with these later ID.3s, if you're buying one, please make sure that it is at least on version 3.0 or ideally later like 3.7, 3.8. And I remember back in the day I had a test drive in one, and just like cars which are the first examples of the factory line, the build quality wasn't the best. There were quite a few rattles, some of the panel gaps were not quite aligned properly. So again, it probably just makes more sense to look for the later business or family trims. Other than the predetermined trims with the included packages, there was also a couple of a la carte options which you could pick on top of said trim levels. Specifically, I know a must-have for many EV drivers is the heat pump, which in other words makes the difference between your summer and winter range a bit smaller than on cars without the heat pump, which need to use a resistive heater to heat up the cabin. However, I have done a video for Wisely Automotive where I've driven two identical BMW i3s side by side on a 60-70 mile route, one with, the other one without the heat pump, to see how much of a difference there is, and it was absolutely minimal. So while I'm not trying to generalize the result, because every manufacturer's implementation of a heat pump can be different, it's not something I would personally be set on, especially considering how rare of an option it is. A pro tip how you can spot a car with a heat pump is if you look under the bonnet, the refrigerant is different. Cars without the heat pump use the standard R1234, or of course if you're buying from a reputable dealer, they should be able to tell instantly just by looking into the parts catalog. The second noteworthy option is the bicycle carrier. This is quite important if you want to carry bikes, because the ID.3, none of the versions have an official roof loading capacity, and likewise you can't officially retrofit a tow hitch. The bike carrier, it does look like a tow hitch. It lives underneath the rear number plate plinth. It just flips down and then you can place in the tow hitch, but it has no towing rating, just a vertical load rating to take on the official VW bike carrier accessory. Again, super rare, at least here in the UK market. Before I wrap up, a couple of little tidbits to point out. There was an additional trim back in the day called City, and it represented the base level for the smaller battery pack, but because it was extra confusing and it was almost identical to the Life trim, it got later unified to Life being the base trim across both the 45 and 58 kWh battery version. Next up, I've been frequently asked about the parking assistance features on these ID.3s. I still want to make a video on those in the future, but there were multiple tiers available. When the ID.3 launched, it didn't have any automated parallel or perpendicular parking whatsoever. On some of the newer cars for the 2022 model year, they gained side ultrasonic parking sensors, which are used to measure spaces as you are passing by them, and that enables the automated parallel parking, but that's only with you sitting in the vehicle and the car just does the maneuvering for you, and you have to make sure it doesn't crash into anything. If you want the intelligent parking, or whatever the marketing name for it is, where you can teach the car certain parking maneuvers, and then when you go to do them again, it recognizes the area and does all of that for you. I believe that's only available on some of the later cars from about 2023. Likewise, the 360-degree camera became a part of the Max trim level, like on this vehicle, but the earlier Maxes didn't have it. VW only started equipping ID.3s with the top-down view, which utilizes the front and side cameras on these high trim levels later on in the production cycle. And lastly, I do believe there is a bit of a unicorn COVID spec, where to simplify manufacturing, VW was only producing Life models, but because of popular demand, they did include a reversing camera. But realistically, if you are looking for a car with a reversing camera, it's easier to just look for the family or business trim. And if you by any chance happen to stumble upon a Life with a reversing camera, then take it as a bonus that you can probably get a slightly cheaper car which still has the feature you want. But trying to specifically look for them on the used market is next to impossible because only a small number of them left the factory. And I think that's about it. I hope I covered everything. If you want to learn more, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, there is going to be a dedicated ID.3 playlist linked in the video description. But let's conclude with some consumer buying advice. It's nice and simple in my eyes. If you just want a car which does the basics, is well equipped, but nothing over the top, you just need to get to and from work, then the Life trim is perfectly acceptable. It has a lot of nice features and you won't generally be disappointed. If you want more features which are not necessarily must-haves but nice to haves, the family trim is probably the best pick of the lineup in terms of price to performance ratio, because you get that big glass panoramic sunroof, the upgraded headlights, the reversing camera, the nicer seats, keyless entry. So even if you're used to higher end cars, you shouldn't really miss anything. Having said that, if you want the best of the best and basically luxury features in a compact vehicle, you can't go wrong with the Max. Not that many of them are on the market, which keeps the prices a little bit high, but you are getting a lot in return for the money. So if you don't want to compromise on gadgets and comfort in your compact vehicle, the Max is the one to go for. And lastly, the Tour or the Pro S with the big 77 kWh battery. I would say because of the compromises like the lack of the fifth seat and the no glass roof and a higher price point, definitely make sure that you need the range, because otherwise it's pretty difficult to justify. But if you do, it is a pretty rare vehicle because it has a very compact footprint, which is very city friendly, but a battery pack equivalent in capacity to something like a much bigger Tesla Model 3. And that's really it. I appreciate if you made it this far into the video. Make sure to hit the like button if you found the information useful. Subscribe if you want to see more electric vehicle content. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.